Starlink worked perfectly well at your last campsite. So why is it unstable at this one? By the end of this video, you'll not only understand the causes of Starlink slowdowns and dropouts, but also the things you can do to improve your connection. To understand that, let's first spend a couple of minutes understanding how Starlink actually works. As always, I will try and explain this visually. Let's say I'm sitting outside of my camper and I open the YouTube app on my phone. My phone connects over Wi-Fi to the Starlink router. From there, the Starlink dish needs to send the request into space. The Starlink dish electronically directs a radio signal towards an available satellite. The satellite receives that request, but the satellite doesn't contain YouTube or the rest of the internet. The data still needs to get back to infrastructure on Earth. The most direct route is from my camper to a satellite and then down to a Starlink gateway ground station. That ground station connects the satellite network into the public internet. My request can then reach YouTube servers. YouTube sends the video data back through the network, up through Starlink, down to my dish, and finally over Wi-Fi to my phone. But there is another possible path. The Starlink satellites can communicate with one another using optical laser links. So while I am sitting beside my campfire watching a video, my data may be traveling from my phone to my camper's roof, into space, between moving satellites, back down to a ground station, across the internet, and then all the way back, all within a fraction of a second. With all this being so state of the art, why is my internet slow? A clear sky is important, but it does not guarantee the same speed at every campground. There are several reasons your Starlink performance can change. The first is obstructions. A heavily wooded site may create packet loss and interruptions even when the speed test occasionally shows a good result. The second is congestion. Starlink satellites' capacity is shared among users in a geographical area. At a remote campground with a few Starlink users, you may have plenty of available network capacity. At a busy resort, festival, racetrack, or a popular campground, many people may be trying to use the same portion of the network. The third factor is your Starlink service plan. Some plans receive different network priorities than others. That is especially relevant for campers using the roam plan. During periods of congestion, the residential plans get priority over roam plans. So if I get 200 megabits per second at one campground and 50 at another, that does not automatically mean that my equipment is broken. The second campground may have more users, more obstructions, different network capacity, or a combination of all three. Campers also have to deal with weather. Starlink uses radio signals, and those signals can be affected by heavy rain, snow, and severe storms. Most normal weather may only create a small performance change, but intense rain can weaken the signal and cause slower speeds or brief interruptions. Slow accumulation on the dish can also be an issue, although all Starlink models can use additional power to melt away the snow. The important point is that weather can have an effect. A major storm near a gateway ground station can also affect part of the network. Starlink's satellite-to-satellite links give the system additional routing options, but they do not make the network completely immune to weather. For campers, this means Starlink should not be treated as an infallible emergency communication system. It can be an incredibly valuable tool, but serious weather, power problems, equipment issues, or obstructions can still interrupt your connection. Now let's talk about the famous Starlink satellites. When people first see a Starlink dish, they often assume it works like a traditional satellite dish. A traditional dish is aimed very precisely at a satellite that appears to stay in the same place in the sky. That is because traditional satellites are geostationary satellites. That means they orbit tens of thousands of miles above Earth and travel at exactly the same speed as the Earth's rotation, hence keeping them in a geostationary or in the same position relative to Earth. Once the dish is aligned, you normally leave it alone. Starlink does not work that way. Starlink satellites are in low Earth orbit, roughly 340 miles above us. Because they are so much closer to Earth, they move across the sky very quickly. That means your Starlink dish is not permanently aimed at one satellite. The Starlink dish contains something called a phased array antenna. A phased array antenna can electronically steer its radio signal towards different satellites without physically turning the entire dish every few seconds. So when I place my Starlink on the roof of my camper, I am not manually aiming it at one specific satellite. I am positioning the antenna so it has access to the correct portion of the sky. The electronics inside the dish handle the precise tracking. And that is extremely important to understand when you're deciding where to place your Starlink at your campsite. Like I said before, you're not trying to create one narrow opening between two tree branches. You're trying to give the dish a wide, consistently clear view of the sky. The satellite your Starlink is communicating with right now may not be the same satellite it uses a minute from now. Now let's talk about trees. Imagine several Starlink satellites moving across the sky above your camper. The dish may be communicating with one of those satellites right now. As that satellite moves away, Starlink prepares to transfer or hand off the connection to another satellite coming into view. When everything is working properly, the handoff happens without you noticing. You can continue watching a video, working on your laptop, or making a call while the connection changes from one satellite to another. But now let's put a large tree next to the camper. Satellite number 1 may still be completely visible. The connection is working. Then the satellite continues moving. The Starlink needs to switch to satellite number 2, but satellite number 2 now is behind the tree. The radio connection cannot simply pass through the trunk and the branches as though they weren't there. Starlink will try and use another available satellite. And because there are usually multiple satellites moving through the usable sky, it may be able to avoid the obstruction. But that depends on the location of the tree, the number of available satellites, and where those satellites are moving at the moment. If the next usable satellite is also blocked, the connection may briefly drop until another clear path becomes available. That can appear as buffering, a frozen call, dropped packets, or a short internet outage. This is why Starlink can work perfectly for several minutes and then briefly disconnect. Nothing has necessarily gone wrong with the equipment. The satellite path may simply have moved behind an obstruction. This is one of the most important lessons for campers. Standing next to your campsite and seeing a large patch of blue sky does not automatically mean Starlink has the view it needs. Here are a few tips and tricks to help you along the way. Understanding the technology gives us a few practical lessons. First, look at the campground layout, not the campground location. A remote campground with an open field may be perfect for Starlink. A campground closer to town but surrounded by tall trees may be much more difficult. Secondly, use satellite maps, campground photos, and campground reviews when possible. Look for sites along open fields, lakes, clearings, or the edge of the campground where you may have a clear view of the sky. Third, consider whether your setup is portable. A permanently roof-mounted Starlink is convenient, but it limits you to the view available directly above the camper. A portable setup allows you to search for a better opening. Fourth, carry enough cable to place your dish away from the camper safely. Do not stretch the cable across a road or create a tripping hazard around the campsite. And finally, use the Starlink obstruction tool before committing to a final placement. Moving the dish during the setup is much easier than discovering during an important work call that a tree blocks your connection every few minutes. So, to recap, how does Starlink work for campers? Your phone or laptop connects to the Starlink router over Wi-Fi. The Starlink phased array antenna electronically tracks satellites moving through low Earth orbit. As one satellite moves away, the network hands your connection to another. The traffic travels from the satellite to a ground gateway or through other satellites using laser links before entering the public internet. Then the response follows the network back to your campsite. The technology itself is incredibly sophisticated. But from a camper's perspective, the most important concept is actually very simple. Starlink does not need a small opening in the sky. It needs a wide, consistently clear view so it can keep communicating with different satellites as they move. And that is why understanding how Starlink works can help you make better decisions before you book the campsite or before you depend on a connection for work. For us, Starlink has made it possible to stay connected in places where campground Wi-Fi and cellular internet simply were not reliable. But it works best when you understand what the dish is trying to see. Because Starlink may be connecting your camper to space, but that tree standing next to your campsite can decide whether the connection will actually work. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.